It started on a Tuesday. The kind of overcast morning where everything just feels heavier, like the sky itself is holding back something. The bus tires rolled over wet pavement, leaving streaks on the windows, while kids packed into the school hallways like they were being funneled into the unknown. You could feel it, something was off. And if you're a parent, a coach, or someone who remembers how brutal middle school can be, then you know what I mean. The hallway wasn't just a hallway that morning, it was a stage. A stage for a moment that was about to change more than just reputations. One boy stood at the center of it, quiet, worn sneakers flapping slightly as he walked, his backpack slung over one shoulder with a broken zipper dangling. His name? Most didn't even know it. Not yet. All they saw were the faded jeans, the stretched-out hoodie, and the unmistakable look of someone who'd worn those clothes long before he ever owned them. But what they didn't see, what no one saw coming, was who he really was. And when the coach finally stepped forward and told them, the silence was deafening. Now, if you're here because you saw that title, Kid Laughs at Boy in Hand-Me-Downs, then the coach reveals his record. You're probably thinking, okay, what's the story behind this? Is it real? What did the coach say? What did this kid do that was so special? And I promise you this right now, by the end of this video, you're not just going to get that answer. You're going to remember this story. Because what happened inside that gym, what was revealed that day, didn't just shut everyone up. It made them think. It made them feel. And if you've ever been judged by how you look, where you're from, or what you could afford, then this one's going to hit different. So take a breath. I want you to really lock in with me here because this isn't just about some school kid drama or a feel-good moral story slapped together for views. This is about how fast people judge and how wrong they can be. You see, this isn't just about hand-me-down clothes. This is about the scars you don't see, the battles someone's already won before they ever walk through the front doors of a school. It's about the way some kids carry the weight of the world on their shoulders and still show up.
Still try.
Still hope someone might see them, not just what they're wearing. And before we go further, let me say this because I want to talk directly to you, the one watching this right now. I don't care if you're watching this on your break, lying in bed, or maybe scrolling late at night trying to shut out the noise of your own day. You're here for a reason. You clicked for a reason. And the reason? You felt something. Maybe you've been laughed at. Maybe you saw someone else getting treated like they were invisible. Or maybe you're just someone who wants to believe that there's still justice in moments like these. Real moments where character wins. Well, keep watching because this story, it delivers on that in a way most don't. And I promise you, what happens next? It's not just heartwarming. It's powerful.
Let me set the stage for you.
It's Ridge Valley Middle School, a mid-sized, brick and concrete campus tucked between a tired shopping center and a cluster of split-level homes that all seem like they were built in the same decade. The kind of school where the front lawn never quite grows right and the flag always looks a little too faded. Inside, though, is where the real world plays out. Like any American middle school, it's a place where reputations are currency and confidence is built, or broken, on things as ridiculous as the brand of shoes you wear or the lunch you bring from home. And today, it was about to explode. The boy in question, his name is Marcus. Wasn't new, but you'd be forgiven for thinking he was. He'd flown under the radar for most of the year. Quiet, polite, barely said a word in class. Never got into trouble. Didn't hang out after school. He was the kind of kid teachers liked but other kids ignored. And part of that was because Marcus never had the look. He wore clothes that were clearly hand-me-downs, too big in the sleeves, pants with that older faded denim, sneakers that had the kind of wear only years could cause. He didn't have the latest phone. He didn't brag about family vacations. He didn't fit. Then there was Chase. Tall for his age, with that cocky swagger that middle school seems to reward. You know the type, he walked like he owned the place. Always had the latest Nike drop, new hoodie every week, AirPods permanently attached. He wasn't just popular. He dominated every room he walked into. And to be fair, it wasn't just confidence, he was smart, athletic, funny. But he was also sharp with his words. The kind of kid who could make fun of someone and get the whole room to laugh while still looking innocent. And that's what happened the day he turned his attention to Marcus. It was in the gym. Coach Sanders had the class doing warm-ups for fitness testing. Sit-ups, sprints, push-ups, the usual. Marcus had stayed toward the back, waiting his turn. But when it was his time to do the 40-yard dash, he stepped forward quietly, all eyes suddenly on him. And that's when it happened. Chase, standing off to the side with his crew, leaned back and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Bet those shoes got more miles than my mom's SUV." The group burst into laughter. Even the coach paused, unsure of what to say. Marcus didn't flinch. He just got into position. And then something happened. Coach Sanders looked down at his clipboard. He asked Marcus a question. And the response? That's where everything changed. Because what Marcus said wasn't just a line, it was a reveal. A moment that took every pair of laughing eyes and turned them dead silent. Because the record that Marcus held? It wasn't just some high score. It was something that not even Chase could believe. Something no one expected. And once the coach told the group who Marcus really was, what he'd already done, you could feel the air shift. You could see the regret crawling across their faces. The mood in the gym flipped like a light switch. And Chase? For once, he was the one looking down at his shoes. But what was that record? What exactly did Marcus say that shut everyone up? And how did one moment in a dusty school gym rewrite the entire story of who he was? That's where we're headed. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Because this isn't just about standing up to a bully. It's about something deeper. It's about respect, the kind that isn't given, but earned, sometimes in ways the world never sees. It's about humility, patience, and the raw truth that no one really knows what someone else is going through. And sometimes, the quietest ones in the room have already lived through more than most of us could imagine. And when the truth comes out, it hits hard. Now here's the deal. You've made it this far, and that tells me something about you. You're not just here to kill time. You're here because you care about stories that matter. So I want you to stay with me because what happens next, Marcus's full story, the coach's jaw-dropping reveal, and the aftermath of that gym scene, it's going to flip everything you think you know about underdogs, about stereotypes, and about what real strength looks like. You won't just watch it. You'll feel it. And just when you think you've figured it out, that's when the twist hits. So, don't go anywhere. You're about to see a truth unfold in real time. And when you do, you'll never look at a kid in hand-me-downs the same way again. Marcus was used to being overlooked. Not invisible, overlooked. There's a difference. He wasn't the kind of kid who sat in the corner hoping not to be noticed. He just learned a long time ago that people only saw what they wanted to see. And more often than not, that wasn't him. At least, not the real him. To the outside world, he was the quiet kid with scuffed sneakers, the one who always had yesterday's lunch packed again for today, the one whose hoodie looked like it had passed through 3 brothers before it reached him. He was the free lunch kid, the kid with no dad, the one who doesn't talk. Labels people slapped on without ever bothering to ask what was underneath. But Marcus had secrets. Not the bad kind. The kind that burn inside you, because you know that if people really knew, they'd never treat you the same way again. And not always in a good way. See, Marcus hadn't always lived here. Just 6 months ago, he was somewhere entirely different. A different town, a different school, a different life. One where people didn't know his name, where his name was written on banners, cheered from bleachers, whispered by rival teams like it meant something sacred. Back there, he wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was a star. But stars don't always get to shine forever. Life has a way of flipping the script when you least expect it, and in Marcus's case, it happened fast. One phone call, one lost job, one eviction notice. His mom, holding everything together on her own, had no choice but to move them to Ridge Valley.
Cheaper rent.
Quieter town. Supposedly a fresh start. Only no one bothered to tell the kids at Ridge Valley that. It didn't help that Marcus arrived in the middle of the semester, when social circles were already sealed tight and reputations had been carved in stone. There was no welcome party, no curious questions, just sideways glances and whispers. Kids like Chase weren't subtle about it either. One look at Marcus's shoes, and he decided all he needed to know. In a place where popularity was measured in TikTok followers and brand names, Marcus might as well have been a ghost. The gym was the one place he felt something familiar. The echo of sneakers on polished floors, the smell of old leather and sweat. It reminded him of where he came from. But even there, he held back. He wasn't ready to show them yet. Not because he was afraid. Because he didn't think they deserved it. Not yet. And then there was Coach Sanders. A tall, wiry man with years of experience etched into the creases of his face. The kind of coach who didn't yell unless it mattered. He saw something in Marcus the first week he showed up, something different. It wasn't just the way he moved, though that was part of it. It was the silence. The discipline. The kind of quiet confidence that only came from someone who had nothing left to prove. Coach Sanders started paying attention. Not in the obvious way. He'd assign Marcus drills he didn't give anyone else. Extra laps. Isolated exercises. Most kids would have seen it as punishment. Marcus saw it for what it was, a test. And he passed every time. But Coach never said anything. Never let on what he knew. Until the day of the 40-yard dash. Until Chase laughed. Until the silence in the gym grew too thick to ignore. That's when Coach finally opened his mouth, and what he revealed cracked the floor beneath them. But we're not there yet. Because the mystery here isn't just what Coach knew. It's how he knew. And why Marcus had tried so hard to keep it hidden. Because for all his quiet strength, Marcus wasn't running from nothing. Something had happened back in his old town. Something he hadn't told anyone. And now that secret was catching up. And that's where things get murky. Rumors started swirling, quietly at first. Someone claimed they saw a news article online about a boy in a different state who shattered middle school track records. Another said they heard a coach mention Marcus's name during a district meeting. Even the assistant principal had pulled Coach Sanders aside one morning after seeing Marcus sprint across the blacktop during fire drill evacuation. But every time someone got close to the truth, Marcus shut down. Changed the subject. Walked away. He wasn't rude about it, just unreachable. Then there was the journal. That's where things took a turn. A kid named Anthony, who sat behind Marcus in history class, accidentally knocked Marcus's backpack over while grabbing his own. A notebook spilled out, black cover, no name on the front. He picked it up, ready to hand it back, but curiosity got the better of him. He flipped it open and froze. Inside were stats. Pages of them. Times, distances, names of track meets, even hand-drawn diagrams of race strategies. But it wasn't just numbers. There were clippings, folded-up articles with headlines like "Middle School Phenom Breaks State Record" and "Mysterious Young Sprinter Wows Coaches." The name in the articles? Marcus Jennings. Anthony never said anything. He slipped the notebook back without a word. But word has a way of leaking when it wants to, and soon, a whisper became a wave. Only now there were two sides forming. Those who started looking at Marcus like he was some kind of legend, and those who couldn't handle the idea that the quiet kid they ignored might actually be better than them. Chase, of course, was leading the second group. And here's where the tension thickens, because not everyone wanted Marcus's past to stay hidden. Not everyone wanted it exposed either. And somewhere in between, someone was working to make sure his story didn't come out. Not the way it really happened. A week before the 40-yard dash, Marcus's locker was broken into. Nothing was taken, but a note was left inside. Just one line, typed on a strip of paper. "You're not who you used to be." No name. No explanation. Just those 7 words. Marcus didn't report it. He just tore the note in half, stuffed it in his pocket, and walked out. But Coach Sanders noticed. And for the first time, he did something that surprised even Marcus. He called him into his office. Not to ask what was wrong. To tell him what he already knew. And what Coach said behind that closed door, what Marcus finally admitted, will reshape the way you see every second of his story. But not yet. Because here's the thing. Not everyone's cheering for Marcus. And while the gym was about to become a stage for truth, it was also becoming a battlefield for something deeper. Jealousy, pride, and a desperate attempt to bury the past. And just when it seemed like everything was finally coming together, something else happened. The record that Coach was about to reveal? It wasn't just impressive. It was impossible. The kind of achievement that shouldn't be possible for a middle schooler. which raised a new question no one had asked before. Was it even real? And with that question, everything spiraled again. Who was telling the truth? Who was trying to keep Marcus's past a secret? And why? And most importantly, what else was Marcus hiding? You're about to find out. Just when Marcus thought things couldn't get stranger, they did. The moment Coach Sanders revealed the record, the blistering 4.52 seconds in the 40-yard dash, gasps had rippled through the gym like a shockwave. It wasn't just fast. It was nearly impossible for a kid his age, especially one who didn't even look like he was trying. The room had gone still, but not everyone was impressed. Some kids whispered to each other, side eyes sharp and doubting. Chase stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight, forcing out a scoff loud enough to carry. But Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't gloat. He just stood there quietly, eyes locked on the coach, like he was waiting for something. Maybe permission. Maybe a sign. But the silence didn't last long, because the next day, something vanished. That notebook, the one with all the stats, race strategies, clippings, it was gone. Marcus had kept it locked in his backpack, zipped up tight, and buried under his hoodie. He never left his bag unattended, especially after the locker note. But when he went to pull it out during lunch to add a new set of sprint times, it wasn't there. He dumped everything on the table, panic rising in his chest, but it was no use. It had disappeared, vanished. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. And that's when the fear set in, not fear of exposure, but fear that someone was trying to erase him completely. At first, Marcus thought maybe it was just stolen. Maybe someone like Chase grabbed it to humiliate him. But something didn't fit. Chase was a lot of things: loud, arrogant, insecure, but he wasn't subtle. And this wasn't a prank. This was calculated. And then came the warning. It happened 2 days later. Marcus had stayed after school to use the gym. Coach Sanders had given him a key to train privately, away from the growing crowd of curious eyes. As he was locking up the side door that led to the old track field, he found another note. Same kind of paper. Same cold, typed font. But this time, the message hit deeper. Stop chasing ghosts. He stared at it for a long time. Not because he didn't understand, but because he did. Someone didn't want the truth coming out. Someone was watching him. And whoever it was, they weren't trying to scare him with violence. They were trying to break him with doubt. And that's when the past came crashing back. It started with a call. Coach Sanders had been on the phone with an old colleague from Marcus's previous school, Coach Donnelly, a man who used to brag about the once-in-a-generation athlete he was lucky enough to train. But when Coach Sanders brought up Marcus's name, there was a long silence on the line. Then, in a hushed voice, Donnelly said something that stuck like a thorn. He's a great kid, but things got messy. You don't know the whole story. And then he hung up. Coach didn't tell Marcus about that call right away. He wrestled with it for a few days, unsure what to believe. He had watched Marcus train, had seen the hunger in his eyes, the precision in his movements. This wasn't some fluke. This was someone who had worked harder than most kids even knew how to. But what did Donnelly mean? What got messy? What wasn't he saying? That same week, a new kid transferred into Ridge Valley. Not just any kid. Julian. From Marcus's old school. The moment they locked eyes across the cafeteria, you could feel the electricity. Julian didn't say anything, didn't even wave. He just stared, expression unreadable, before turning back to his tray. But Marcus's entire body stiffened. Something about Julian being there wasn't right. It wasn't just a coincidence. This felt planned. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. His mind raced through memories, good ones, bad ones, all tangled together. He remembered the last meet before they left town. The one where he ran like fire was chasing him. The one where something happened after the race, something he'd buried deep. Someone accused him of cheating. A rival parent, bitter and desperate, claimed Marcus's time was too fast to be real, said he must have jumped the gun, manipulated the stopwatch, even hinted that Coach Donnelly had helped fudge the numbers. It was baseless. Jealousy. But the damage had been done. A whisper campaign spread fast. People Marcus had known for years started looking at him sideways.
Not all of them.
but enough. And the worst part? Julian had been there, had told Marcus he had his back, had promised to set the record straight. But instead, Julian had gone quiet, had distanced himself, had looked the other way while Marcus and his mom packed up and left under a cloud of doubt. Now Julian was here, and he still wasn't talking. Coach Sanders finally brought it up. "What happened back there?" he asked gently after practice one night. Marcus hesitated. His fingers curled around the bench he was sitting on. He wanted to tell the truth. He wanted to unload the weight. But some part of him still didn't trust it wouldn't be used against him. And that hesitation, that moment of silence, that was when Coach realized just how deep this ran. But even Coach didn't know everything. Because the next morning, Ridge Valley's school website was hacked. It was only for about 20 minutes, but it was enough to cause chaos. A video clip was uploaded to the homepage, grainy and poorly lit, showing what appeared to be Marcus crossing the finish line at his last championship meet, but with the timer blinking in red and an announcer's voice in the background saying something about review under protest. It was an old recording, one that hadn't even been released publicly. Only a few coaches and league officials had access to it, which meant someone was digging. Someone who had access. Someone close. The school's IT department pulled the video and restored the site quickly. But the damage was done. Kids were talking. Teachers were whispering. Suddenly, Marcus wasn't just the mystery kid anymore. He was the controversial one. A subject of gossip, not admiration. And somewhere behind it all, someone was pulling strings to control the story. And then something even stranger happened. That night, as Marcus sat in his room, staring at the torn half of the original locker note, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. Just one message. "You left something behind." Attached was a photo. It was the first page of his stolen notebook, which means the notebook isn't gone. It's in someone else's hands. And whoever has it doesn't want the truth buried. They want it used. But for what? And why now? Marcus stared at the photo on his phone, his heart thudding in his chest like a warning drum. The image was real. He'd recognize that page anywhere. His handwriting, his sketches, his timing breakdowns, all right there. It wasn't just the content that rattled him. It was the meaning behind it. Whoever sent this didn't want to destroy him. They wanted him to know they had the power to. The message was layered. They could have leaked it, twisted it, even doctored it to sabotage him entirely. But instead, they dropped a breadcrumb, a subtle taunt, almost like they were testing how far he'd go to get it back. And that's when things spiraled, because Marcus wasn't the only one receiving messages anymore. The next morning, Coach Sanders found something in his office mailbox. No name, no return address, just a small envelope with a flash drive inside. At first, he assumed it was game footage or a highlight reel from another school trying to schedule a scrimmage. But the moment he loaded it onto his laptop, his stomach dropped. It wasn't game tape. It was audio. A recording. Coach recognized his own voice almost instantly. He was speaking during a one-on-one meeting with Marcus from 2 weeks ago, talking about training regimens, speed drills, and Marcus's impressive recovery time. But layered over that was something disturbing, distorted whispers, looped and edited into the audio track, repeating cryptic phrases like, "Don't trust him. He's hiding everything," just like before. It wasn't just creepy, it was invasive. The conversation had been recorded without consent, without explanation, and it had been manipulated to sound like a conspiracy. Coach knew immediately this wasn't just about Marcus anymore. Someone was trying to isolate them, to twist the truth into something darker, to push them toward doubt and confusion. And worst of all, someone had access to the locker room office. That meant it was either a student, a staff member, or someone close to the school who knew the layout. That's when Coach made a choice he hadn't made in years. He called in an old friend from his college days who now worked in digital security, someone who owed him a favor. Not law enforcement. Not yet. But someone who could help dig deeper without drawing too much attention. Because the more this unraveled, the more Coach feared what he might find. At the same time, across town, Marcus's mother, who had been working 2 jobs just to keep their new life afloat, received an anonymous letter at her job. It was handwritten, in sharp slanted cursive, sealed in a manila envelope. She nearly dismissed it as junk until she opened it and froze. Inside was a photocopy of Marcus's old-school disciplinary file. But it wasn't the real file. It had been edited. The wording had been changed to suggest Marcus had been caught cheating during a track meet, that he had received a private warning from the league, that his old school had agreed to quietly let him transfer to avoid a scandal. All of it false. Every word fabricated. But to someone on the outside, it looked official. It had the school's letterhead, the principal's digital signature, even a fake watermark. Whoever did this had gone to extreme lengths to plant seeds of doubt, not just among students and coaches, but in his own family. Marcus's mom didn't tell him right away. She just sat in the back of her car after work that night, gripping the letter, her mind racing. This wasn't a joke anymore. This wasn't some high school jealousy thing. This was methodical, organized, intentional. And it made her wonder, had this been following them since they moved? Had someone from the past carried this obsession with them across state lines? Or had someone new picked up the scent and decided to finish what someone else started? Meanwhile, Julian had started acting strangely. For the first few days, he kept his distance from Marcus, barely acknowledging him at school. But now he was showing up to track practice uninvited, leaning on the bleachers during drills, casually observing like he belonged. He hadn't officially joined the team. He hadn't even signed up for school athletics. But there he was, asking the coach for advice, chatting with teammates about sprint mechanics, slowly slipping into the background like he'd always been there. And he wasn't just watching Marcus, he was watching everyone around him. And that made Marcus uneasy. Late one afternoon, Marcus cornered Julian behind the gym. The conversation started tense, with Marcus demanding answers. Why he was here, what he was doing, whether he had anything to do with the notebook or the hacked video. But Julian didn't respond with anger. He just looked tired, nervous, like someone carrying a secret too heavy to say out loud. "You don't know the whole story," Julian muttered. "You never did. And if you keep pushing, you're going to find something you wish you hadn't." That's all he said before walking away, leaving Marcus more confused than before. Back home, Marcus dug through an old storage box in his closet. It was full of things from his old school, photos, medals, race bibs. At the bottom was a folded piece of paper he hadn't seen in months, a newsletter from the local track league, highlighting the season's standout athletes. Julian's name was in it. So was Marcus's. But scribbled in red ink next to Julian's name was a note he didn't remember writing. Ask him what he saw the night before the race. That changed everything. Because Marcus suddenly remembered waking up early the morning of his last championship to find his shoes had been moved. They'd been tucked away the night before, but that morning, they were by the front door. He'd brushed it off. Thought maybe his mom moved them while cleaning. But now, a darker thought took hold. What if someone had tampered with them? What if someone was setting him up, even back then? And now that person might be here again. The pieces weren't fitting together yet, but the pattern was forming. Someone had a plan, and Marcus had been a part of it longer than he knew. And the scariest part wasn't that someone was targeting him. It was that more than one person might be involved. It started with footsteps, barely audible at first, just the occasional crunch of gravel or the snap of a twig. Marcus thought he was imagining things. After all, the track was always quiet this late. He liked to run alone in the evenings, just before dusk, when the last amber light draped itself over the empty bleachers and the world felt paused. But this time, the silence wasn't comforting. It felt watched. He slowed to a jog, his breath fogging in the cool air, his ears straining. The footsteps stopped when he stopped. When he resumed, they did too, just slightly behind him, deliberately out of sync. He turned sharply, expecting to catch someone in the act, but the track was empty. No teammates. No coach. Just the rustling of the trees and the eerie whistle of wind slipping through the chain-link fence. That night, he ran home faster than ever, not to break a record, but to outrun a feeling that had burrowed deep into his chest. Something wasn't just off. It was wrong. The next morning, everything was different. Marcus's mom didn't show up to work. Her boss called the house at noon, saying she never clocked in. That wasn't like her. She'd never missed a shift, never showed up late, not even during flu season. At first, Marcus figured she must have slept through her alarm, but when he knocked on her bedroom door, there was no answer. She wasn't home. Her car was gone. Her phone was off. There were no texts, no calls, no notes. The apartment felt empty in a way that made the walls seem thinner, like the whole place had been holding its breath since she left. Panic didn't set in right away. Marcus tried to stay calm, told himself she probably just ran an errand and got held up. But by nightfall, when the lights were still off and her purse was still missing, something inside him snapped. He checked hospitals, called friends, even drove to the diner where she worked, but no one had seen her since yesterday. That's when he noticed the envelope, tucked neatly under their front door, like a cruel afterthought. There was no name on it, just his initials scrawled across the front. Inside was a single Polaroid photo, grainy and dark, taken from what looked like a parking garage. In the center of the frame was a figure, blurry, but unmistakably his mom, walking alone, glancing over her shoulder. Scribbled on the back in the same handwriting as before were the words, "Some questions have consequences." That's when fear gave way to something else. Dread. Not the kind that makes you freeze, but the kind that wakes up something primal, something sharp. Marcus didn't know who was behind this or what they wanted, but he knew one thing. This wasn't about reputation anymore. It was about survival. Desperate for answers, Marcus returned to school the next day, hollow-eyed and running on fumes. The hallways, once familiar, now felt sinister. Whispers followed him. Stares lingered too long. Even his teachers seemed uneasy. Coach Sanders tried to pull him aside during lunch, but Marcus brushed him off. He couldn't trust anyone completely now, not with his mom missing, and that photo burned into his memory. He needed to stay ahead, stay alert. But the cracks were forming. Every noise made him flinch. Every time his phone buzzed, his chest clenched. He began checking over his shoulder constantly, cataloging every unfamiliar face, every car that passed by more than once. The paranoia wasn't just growing, it was consuming him. And then came the text message. It pinged just as he was leaving practice. No contact info, just a random number and a message that read, "You weren't supposed to keep the notebook." That single line made him stop dead in his tracks. Whoever this was, they knew everything. And they were getting bolder. That night, Marcus locked his bedroom door and dug the notebook out from the shoebox under his bed. He flipped through the pages, drills, personal notes, sketches of track routes, but then something caught his eye. Near the back was a page he'd never seen before. It was taped in, like someone had added it without him noticing. It was a map, a crude one, drawn in ink and smudged along the edges, showing a place that looked eerily like the old industrial park near the river, the one that had been abandoned since the fire last year. Beneath the map was a date, Friday, midnight. He didn't want to go. Every instinct screamed at him not to. But if there was any chance it would lead to his mom, he had no choice. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that someone else had also received the same map. Someone he hadn't seen in weeks. Someone who might be walking into the same trap from a different direction. And that's when the story started unraveling, not in clarity, but in chaos. Because Marcus wasn't just being followed anymore. He was being hunted. The air around the old industrial park was thick with silence, the kind that presses against your skin and makes even the smallest sound feel deafening. Marcus had never been here before, not in daylight and certainly not in the middle of the night. The rusted gates were still broken, just like the newspaper articles said after the fire, half bent, half melted, pointing toward an eerie maze of metal and shadows. He parked his mom's old Corolla 2 blocks away, careful not to leave it too close, and walked the last stretch with the hood of his sweatshirt pulled low and the map folded tightly in his fist. Every step echoed with doubt. He wasn't sure if he was walking into a rescue or a trap, but the weight of unanswered questions was heavier than his fear. He had to know. He ducked through a torn fence and followed the markings on the map past burned-out trailers and shattered windows. Then he saw it, a faint glow from inside one of the old garages. Someone was already there. He moved slowly, keeping low, peering through the gaps in the metal siding. And that's when he saw her, his mom, tied to a chair. Alive, conscious, and clearly terrified. But before Marcus could act, a voice from behind made his blood run cold. "You're early," it said. It was Coach Sanders. Marcus spun around, adrenaline surging, fists clenched, ready for a fight. But what came next wasn't an attack. It was a confession. Coach raised his hands and stepped out of the shadows, calm as ever, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. "She was never supposed to be involved," he said, almost apologetically. "Neither were you." Marcus's heart thundered. Nothing made sense. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded, his voice shaking. But what Coach said next flipped the entire story on its head. "Because the real record you've been chasing? It was never yours to break. It was hers." That's when it hit him, his mom. The woman he thought worked double shifts just to keep food on the table. The woman who always knew exactly what to say when he was too tired to keep running. The woman who taught him how to sprint by turning everyday walks into games of tag when he was just a kid. She wasn't just a supportive mom. She had been him before he ever picked up a pair of cleats. Coach pulled an old photo from his jacket, worn at the edges, yellowed with time. It showed a young woman on a podium, wearing a college track uniform, gold medal around her neck. Marcus took it with shaking hands. It was her. Younger, fiercer, eyes locked on the crowd like she owned the future. "You think you're a natural?"
Coach said.
"You think that talent came from nowhere?"
"No."
She was a state champion. National qualifier. But she walked away from it all before the big leagues, disappeared after a scandal. One that I helped bury. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. None of this had ever come up. Not once. "Why would she hide that?" he whispered. But Coach's expression darkened. "Because the man who tried to take her down is back. And he's not just after her anymore." That was the real twist. The messages, the photos, the fear, they weren't meant for Marcus. He was collateral. The notebook wasn't about him breaking records. It was a coded diary, a record of the past she never wanted exposed. Coach had helped protect her back then, and now he was doing it again. But this time, someone else had found out. Someone who wanted revenge, not for something Marcus did, but for something that happened long before he was even born. Just then, footsteps echoed through the building, heavier, slower, purposeful. Someone else was there. Coach's head snapped toward the door, and his voice dropped low. "You need to hide.
Now."
There's more to this than you know, and if they see you." But it was too late. The door creaked open, and a shadow stepped inside. Not just any shadow. It was someone Marcus knew. Someone he never suspected. And everything he thought was real shattered. The figure stepped out of the doorway, and Marcus's heart dropped like a stone. It was Coach Simmons, his other coach, the one who ran drills with him every afternoon, the one who always gave him a ride home when it rained, the one his mom trusted enough to bring into their living room and offer coffee like he was part of the family. But now, in the half-light of that ruined garage, he looked like a stranger. His expression was hard, eyes unreadable, hands tucked in the pockets of a windbreaker that somehow looked darker than usual. "I told you to leave this alone, Marcus," he said, his voice heavy, almost disappointed. "You had a future. Scholarships, records to break, colleges lining up. And now you're here, chasing ghosts." Marcus backed up instinctively, his eyes darting from Simmons to Coach Sanders to his mother, who was still tied to the chair, her face lined with panic. "You did this?" Marcus asked, voice breaking. "Why?" But Simmons didn't answer right away. He took a slow step forward. "Because I've worked too damn hard to see it all crumble now. You think you're the only one who trained, who bled for this. Your name wasn't supposed to be in the spotlight. Not yours. Not hers." He pointed to Marcus's mom. She had her moment. Then she walked away, and she never should have been allowed to come back. Marcus's mind raced. None of it made sense. Simmons had always pushed him. Yes, sometimes too hard. But this? Was it jealousy? Revenge? Fear? He turned to Coach Sanders, who was slowly inching toward his mom, trying to untie the ropes without drawing attention. Marcus didn't know who to trust anymore. Simmons had always been there, cheering louder than anyone. But now he was the one standing in the doorway of a nightmare. Then Simmons dropped the final blow. "I can make all of this disappear," he said, voice calm. "The notebook. The messages. The photos. I can clean it all up, no one will know a thing. But you need to walk away. Tonight. You go home. You forget this ever happened. Your mom stays silent. And I make sure your name stays on every scout's list from now until the draft." His stare didn't flinch. "But if you don't, I will ruin both of you." That was it. The impossible choice. Save his future and abandon the truth, or fight for the truth and risk losing everything. Marcus felt like the walls were closing in. He thought about the college offers he'd been dreaming of, the shot at making it out, giving his mom the life she deserved. But he also thought about her sacrifices, the truth she buried for so long, the fear in her eyes right now. What kind of man would he be if he turned his back on her? The pressure was suffocating. Every second that ticked by felt like an earthquake in his chest. Simmons watched him, waiting, as if daring him to make the wrong move. "No one will believe you," he added, just to twist the knife deeper. "You're a kid. I'm the adult with credentials, references, years of clean records. You think anyone's going to take your side? You think you're going to beat me?" Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came. There was no playbook for this. No coach, no drill, no stopwatch. Just raw choice. And that's when his mom spoke, softly but clearly. "Don't let them rewrite your story, Marcus." The words hit like lightning. It wasn't just about him anymore. It never had been. But before Marcus could even move, a phone rang. Not his. Not Simmons's. Coach Sanders pulled a burner phone from his coat and looked at the screen. His eyes narrowed, and for the first time that night, his voice cracked. "They know we're here." Marcus froze. "Who?" Sanders didn't answer right away. He looked to the shadows behind Simmons, then past them. "There's someone else," he whispered. "Someone pulling all the strings. And if they're making calls now, it means the clock just ran out." That was when the lights in the building went out. Total darkness. 1 second of silence. Then the unmistakable sound of a door locking from the outside. And suddenly, this wasn't just about secrets or choices. It was about survival. Marcus barely had time to react before the air around him shifted, panic rising, breath quickening, the sound of his own heartbeat pounding like a war drum in his ears. The lights were out, the door was locked, and the room was plunged into an eerie silence that felt suffocating. He reached out blindly in the dark, calling out for his mother, for Coach Sanders, anything to break the deafening stillness. But what shattered the silence first wasn't a voice. It was the sound of someone running. Then a crash. Then a voice he recognized, half whisper, half growl, hissed from across the room. "They're here. And we were never supposed to find this place." In that instant, the lie unraveled. This wasn't just about a disgraced coach or a forgotten athletic record. This was a cover-up that reached far beyond the bleachers and practice fields. It was about stolen scholarships, falsified records, and kids like Marcus, working twice as hard for half the recognition, being pushed down to keep a certain narrative in place. Marcus had been digging into something so much bigger than himself without realizing it. His mom's silence, Simmons's manipulation, the threatening messages, the shadowy figure from the booster meeting. None of it was isolated. It was all tied together by one ugly truth. The school board, the athletic department, and even some parents were all in on a rigged system designed to promote certain players over others for money, legacy, and control. And then the deepest cut of all. As emergency lights flickered on with a weak glow, Marcus finally saw who had been standing behind Simmons the entire time. His stomach dropped as he recognized the outline of a man he never questioned, never doubted, never even suspected. It was Principal Keller, the same man who gave him his first varsity jersey, the same man who spoke at his father's funeral, told him to be strong, to lead, to carry the torch forward. "You?" Marcus whispered, voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. Keller stepped forward, adjusting his cufflinks with a calm that chilled Marcus to the bone. "You're not supposed to be here, son. You were never meant to find this place. And you were never going to be the face of our legacy. You were just a filler, a warm-up act for the real stars." Marcus felt like the floor was being ripped out from beneath him. Every practice, every extra lap, every night he spent icing sore muscles and missing out on life, it had all been for nothing. He wasn't just overlooked. He was used. A name to pad stats, a player to keep the team eligible while someone else's son was being groomed for headlines and scholarships. It wasn't just favoritism. It was sabotage. But the worst part? It had been happening for years. Dozens of kids, maybe more, silenced, benched, forgotten so the school could funnel resources and media attention to a select few with the right last names and connections. Sanders had known. That's why he kept digging, why he took the risk to help Marcus. And Simmons? He had been the enforcer. The one who made sure the story stayed neat and polished. But Marcus's mom, she had been the whistleblower. Years ago. Back when she was a student-athlete herself. And when she refused to play by their rules, they buried her achievements, cut her from the record books, and made sure no one ever spoke her name again. Now, history was trying to repeat itself with Marcus. But this time, they made a mistake. They underestimated him. And just when he thought it couldn't get any worse, Sanders, who had managed to free his mom, shouted something that cut through the chaos. "They've got the files, Marcus. All of them. Videos, emails, player rankings, payout records. It's all stored on the school server, under a dummy alumni profile. That's why they locked us in here. They're wiping it now." Marcus's blood ran cold. They weren't just trying to intimidate them. They were erasing the truth, rewriting history in real time, and the only proof left was slipping away with every passing second. This wasn't just about his mom's legacy anymore. This was about every kid who ever got pushed aside. Every parent who trusted the system. Every future that got sabotaged in the shadows. The pressure exploded into motion. Sanders grabbed a crowbar from a pile of broken tools and began smashing through a boarded window. "We've got one shot at stopping this," he growled. "But we've got to move now." And just as Marcus turned to help, his mom grabbed his arm, eyes wide with something more than fear. It was urgency and guilt. "There's something else I didn't tell you," she whispered. "Something about your father." But before she could say another word, a blinding beam of light cut across the room. The door opened, and someone with a badge stepped through. Not a cop, not a teacher, a federal agent. And Marcus realized this wasn't just about their town. This was national. And the game had just changed forever. Marcus could feel his hands trembling as the federal agent stepped into the room, his badge catching the pale emergency light like a sharp flash of warning. The agent's presence sent a wave of silent tension rippling through the space. Sanders froze mid-step, his mom culled Marcus closer like she was bracing for impact, and Principal Keller stood there, perfectly still, the faintest trace of a smirk on his face, as if this too had been part of the plan. But the agent's eyes weren't on Keller. They were locked on Marcus. "You," the agent said calmly, "come with me."
Now.
There was no time to think, only act. Marcus followed as he was led through a maze of maintenance hallways beneath the school, places he never even knew existed. It was only when they emerged into a locked IT room, humming with dying servers and flickering screens, that the true weight of what they were walking into hit him. The federal agent pointed to a terminal still online, protected behind layers of encryptions. "This is what your mother found 18 years ago," he said. "And what you just walked into is exactly what they've been trying to bury ever since." The files were damning. Player rankings manipulated by faculty, game footage edited to make favored students shine, false scouting reports, booster club bribes, and worst of all, student-athletes deliberately benched or injured to rig outcomes. And it wasn't just the school. The database linked to other institutions across the state, forming a web of corruption that spanned school districts, college programs, and recruiting agencies. This wasn't about one boy in hand-me-downs being mocked by a rich kid. This was about a nationwide system designed to elevate privilege over talent, reputation over effort, names over merit. It was exploitation dressed as opportunity. And right in the middle of the network's command center was the last profile opened, Marcus's. Flagged, not for promotion, but for containment. Suddenly, The monitors started shutting down one by one. Someone was pulling the plug remotely, and fast. The agent sprang into action, trying to capture what he could, while Marcus instinctively scrolled through the remaining directories. Then, buried in a hidden folder labeled Legacy Asset, 2007, he found it. A video file. He opened it. The screen flickered before showing grainy footage of a much younger Principal Keller in a meeting room, facing none other than Marcus's father. The conversation was hushed but clear. "I'm not going to let you do this to those kids, Keller. I don't care how many boosters you've got backing you. You have a family, James. Think about your son." "That's exactly why I'm not backing down." And then the feed cut. The date on the video was just 3 days before Marcus's father's fatal car crash, an accident no one had ever questioned until now. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. His mom had never talked about it, never hinted at anything suspicious. But the timing, the tension, the warning in Keller's voice. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. The room was suddenly filled with noise. Doors slammed open down the hall. Heavy boots echoed. Voices shouted. The agent grabbed Marcus and shoved a flash drive into his hand.
Run.
"Don't stop. Get this to the press. Don't let them shut this down again." Marcus bolted out the back exit just as a group of men in security uniforms stormed the server room. The agent stayed behind, and Marcus didn't see him again. Outside, rain was pouring. His phone was soaked and dead, but Sanders was already pulling up in a beat-up truck, eyes wide. "You got it," he shouted. Marcus nodded, breathless, holding up the drive. "Then get in. We're taking this to the top." They didn't make it 5 miles before the road was blocked. Principal Keller stood in the headlights, flanked by 2 SUVs and a man Marcus didn't recognize, but whose face he'd seen earlier in a photo buried in the files. A state official. One of the power players. "Give us the drive," Keller called out, "and this ends here. You walk away with a full ride. Your mom walks away with her job back. And no one has to know any of this happened." Marcus looked at Sanders, then at the drive. The temptation burned, but so did the betrayal. "You kill my father," Marcus said, stepping forward. "And you use me to cover it up. You think I'm going to stay quiet now?" Keller's mask dropped. His voice darkened. "Then you're no better than he was. And you'll end up just like him." What followed wasn't a physical fight. It was a standoff of truths. Sanders stepped forward with his phone already live streaming. Marcus began reading the names from the files aloud, one by one. Players, parents, officials. The truth was already being broadcast to thousands online, and comments started flooding in. People watching, recording, demanding answers. Keller lunged, but headlights flooded the scene. More cars pulled up, flashing red and blue lights. Not local, federal. They weren't alone anymore. As officers swarmed the area and Keller was handcuffed, Marcus stood there, soaked, breathless, but steady. The weight of everything hit him at once. The years of silence, the pain his mom carried, the reason his father died. And now it was over. Or so he thought. Because just as he turned to hand off the drive, Sanders stopped him. "There's something else on there," he said quietly. "Something we didn't know about." Marcus frowned, opening the last file he hadn't yet seen, one marked, "Next." It listed names. Future students. The cycle wasn't just a relic of the past, it was still happening. And someone even higher than Keller was pulling the strings. Marcus realized the story wasn't over. It had only just begun. The days following the takedown of the conspiracy were a blur. The press coverage was massive. People in Marcus's hometown couldn't stop talking about the scandal that had rocked the school district, the corrupt system that had controlled student-athletes' fates for years. The school board was dissolved. The boosters who had used their wealth to rig the system were exposed and charged. Keller was arrested, but Marcus knew that wasn't the end. It couldn't be. They still didn't know who had been the real mastermind behind the whole operation, the person pulling the strings from behind the scenes, the one who had kept their hands clean while everyone else took the fall. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was still just a pawn in a much larger game. But as the weeks passed, he found a strange sense of peace. The drive that had once filled him with rage now seemed like a key that unlocked not just a dark past, but also a future where he didn't have to carry the weight of his father's death alone anymore. The truth was out. People knew. And for the first time, he could finally feel like he wasn't being controlled. His dad's legacy wasn't one of failure or being silenced. It was a legacy of resistance, of fighting for what was right, no matter the cost. His mom had finally found her voice again. After years of silence, after watching her son fight this battle, she had begun to speak out about what had happened to Marcus's father. She hadn't wanted him to carry that burden, but she now understood that Marcus wasn't just honoring his father's memory. He was continuing the fight his dad had started all those years ago. They spoke often about what to do next, how to ensure no one else fell victim to a system so corrupt, and even though they didn't have all the answers, they had each other. The bond between them was stronger than ever. But there was still something that tugged at Marcus. Something unanswered. Every time he tried to close the chapter on his father's death, that nagging feeling would return. The files. The names. The mysterious next list. It had haunted him, and though the authorities had promised to investigate further, Marcus couldn't help but wonder if they would actually find the person who had orchestrated everything. Could he be sure that justice had truly been served? Or was there more to uncover? One evening, while walking through town, Marcus noticed something he hadn't seen before, a billboard advertising a prestigious college scouting event coming up. Underneath, there was a tagline, "Your future begins here." But something about it felt off. As he stared at the advertisement, the unsettling feeling in his gut returned. He pulled out his phone and checked the school's roster. One of the names from the next list was there, someone he recognized but had never thought about again after the scandal had broken. An athlete, poised to rise, set up for a scholarship with a smile on his face that made Marcus's blood run cold. Was it possible that the same system was in place, hidden just beneath the surface, ready to pick new victims? Before Marcus could dive deeper, a notification popped up on his phone, a message from Sanders. "We need to talk." The weight of the text hit him like a punch in the stomach. The air around him seemed to still. He stared at the screen for a long moment, knowing deep down that this wasn't over.
It couldn't be.
The truth wasn't fully out yet. But even as Marcus set off to meet Sanders, there was a strange peace in knowing that no matter how far this thing went, he wouldn't be backing down again. The fire that had once burned in him, out of anger, out of confusion, had transformed. It was no longer about proving himself or avenging his father. It was about making sure that future generations didn't fall into the same trap he had. It was about turning the darkness he'd been handed into something better for those who came after. And that, no matter where the trail led, was a fight worth finishing. As Marcus walked down the road, his mind racing with possibilities, he couldn't help but feel that the story wasn't ending here. Not really. The system was still out there, still breathing, and maybe, just maybe, it would take more than one person to bring it down for good. But for now, he had peace. And that was enough.
For now.
Yet, in the back of his mind, as he rounded the corner to meet Sanders, he knew the fight was far from over. And somehow it always would be. The camera zoomed out on Marcus's figure, disappearing into the shadows of the streetlights. The story may have reached its resolution for now, but the legacy of the battle he'd fought lingered, alive in every new person who'd been inspired to stand up, to ask the questions that needed to be asked, and to never, ever let the truth slip away again. And with that, the screen faded to black, leaving only the lingering thought that the real fight, in the end, is always the one that continues long after the story seems finished.